Today I'm sitting with David, who most recently was a vice president and head of engineering at Mixpanel, and he previously worked as an eng manager at Twitter and at Amazon. When I was at Facebook, we had this group internally called Engineering Promotion Stories. And the idea was that you would basically track these very senior folks and how do they get to the level they're at. We talked earlier about how there's one particular engineer at Mixpanel, and you were obviously overseeing the whole team. And you mentioned how there was one engineer who had an amazing growth trajectory. So I'd love for you just to share, how did this engineer accomplish so much in such a short amount of time?
We had this engineer join us relatively early in his career. He joined us from Uber, was maybe only 2 years into his career. During his time at Mixpanel, he went from, I think, starting as what I would consider to be like the equivalent of a software engineer 2, to advancing to senior engineer, and then staff, and then TLM, and then a principal TLM, all over the course of probably about 4 years or so.
Wow. And just curious, so the level that he advanced to, principal TLM, what % of the engineers were at or above that level, just to get a sense of how rare that was?
Extremely rare. I think there were maybe only 2 in the entire engineering department at that time. So it was definitely a very, very fast rise. When I reflect on it, that really the biggest contributor is that this engineer really had a nose for impact, right? The thing about software engineering, and really the thing about a lot of things in life, is that the work that you do, the impact that it can have, follows a bit of a power law. Oftentimes, if you have 5 projects that you're considering, one of those projects is going to make up 80% of the impact of those 5 projects in total, right? And if you have the ability to consistently pick out what that one project is going to be, then congratulations, you're a 10x engineer, right? For me, I've definitely seen a lot of software engineers who have been fast at writing code or wrote great code, but it's rare to have a situation where you can literally 10x your impact by doing that. Yeah. But if you're able to very consistently pick out the kinds of projects that are going to deliver on an insane amount of impact, then that'll get you there in a hurry. There's one example of that I really like from my time at Mixpanel. I remember there was a period of time in which we were thinking about ways that we could make our infrastructure spend a little bit more efficient, right? Mixpanel was using Google Cloud, and we were trying to reduce our spend. And we asked this engineer that I mentioned to be the lead for that project. And I think a lot of software engineers would think about this as a software problem, right? The question is hey, how do I make my software more efficient? Rework some of my queries, maybe a database migration could be more efficient, right? Maybe we can make some of our compute more efficient. But this engineer actually started by thinking about this as a customer problem, right? And his perspective was hey, he had this hypothesis. He was I bet if you look at across all of Mixpanel's customers and you pick out the top 10, I bet that the top 10 of those customers are responsible for a really disproportionate amount of our costs. And further, that if you really dig into those top 10 cost generators for the company, that there's probably a lot of, at least a couple of them, where the economics are really upside down, right? Meaning that we're spending a lot more than those customers are actually paying us. And so, digging into that, it absolutely turned out to be true, right? And he was able to convert what was potentially a really complex software engineering problem to one where we actually reached out to a handful of those customers that were actually generating the most cost for Mixpanel, and figured out a way to incentivize them to dramatically reduce how much they were costing us by reworking the way that they integrated with us. And so, a project that I think a lot of us in the engineering department were expecting would take months, in order for us to see the results. I think over the course of just a couple of weeks, we saw being able to get to 80% of the goal that we had set out for ourselves very, very quickly. I think that's just a great example of having a nose for impact, and not thinking about every problem, within a certain box.
Yeah.
Right.
And that was why he was able to rise the ranks, get promoted so quickly, because of this kind of product intuition.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Mixpanel being a startup was the type of company that really rewarded outcomes, really rewarded impact, regardless of how you got there. Though, to be fair, not every company does that, right? Not every company thinks about promotion the same way. If you're a software engineer, that's something for you to think about, right? It's like, what are the kinds of things that your company values? And is that aligned with how you think about, the work that you're doing?
Yeah. By and large, it's not about working on the most gnarly technical challenge or even working 12 hours a day.
Yeah.
It's much more about, hey, do I have that nose for impact? Can I identify and solve this thing which is going to move the needle for whatever the company cares about?
Yeah.
So one question I had is, how did this engineer have that insight that, hey, there's going to be a disproportionate amount of spend and cost incurred for Mixpanel on these few customers, and we could just change their behavior essentially, rather than solving this gnarly technical problem? How did he get that? Was it just through working with PMs or data science, or where did that come from?
A lot of that maybe just meant intuition for him. One of the ways in which people end up having a nose for impact is figuring out how to kind of work backwards from the results that they're trying to get.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
And I think in this case, the really interesting thing to realize is that this problem of trying to reduce costs for your infrastructure is one where, making software changes is only one angle towards attacking that problem, right? There's actually several others, there's the software efficiency angle, there's the angle of working with your customers, there's the angle of working with your software vendor, potentially renegotiating your contract or changing the resources that you actually use from Google Cloud. And so a lot of it starts with having a really open mind and thinking critically about how you can have the most impact that you could possibly have in a relatively short period of time.
I think this story is a really good illustration of what Alex and I are trying to do with Taro. The way you succeed as an engineer, especially at these higher levels, is not about pounding your head against the wall for 12 hours a day on some coding challenge. It is about exactly this story of how can you think outside the box and actually deliver the impact that business cares about. And if you want to learn more from David, Alex and I have actually done a bunch more with David, and we put that content in our app. So if you want to download the app for Android or iOS, go to jointaro.com. A link is in the description. Once again, David, thanks. And if people want to learn more or connect with you, where should I navigate people to?
You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is David Pan.
Perfect. Okay, so then what I'll do is I will leave a link for your LinkedIn in the description. Feel free to connect with David, and thanks again for being here.